Something in your life is broken. Your income, your health, a relationship, a business. You've tried fixing it 3 times. Same approach each time, same result each time. You conclude the problem is unsolvable. You adapt to it, you call that maturity. Meanwhile, Elon Musk inherited a space industry where rocket launches cost $65 million minimum. Every aerospace engineer on Earth accepted this as the floor. Decades of industry consensus. Billions in infrastructure built around that assumption. Musk had no aerospace background, no history in the industry. He looked at the cost structure and asked one question nobody in the industry was asking. What would this actually cost if we started from scratch using only the price of raw materials? The answer was 2% of 65 million. 2%. The entire remaining 98% was assumption, tradition, legacy process, and industry habit that everyone had stopped questioning because everyone had stopped questioning it. SpaceX now launches for under $3 million. They didn't invent new physics. They didn't discover new materials. They questioned assumptions that an entire industry had accepted as permanent reality. That questioning process has a name, a structure, a documented methodology used by the greatest problem solvers in history across engineering, medicine, science, and business. And it works on every broken thing in your life that you've accepted as permanently broken. I'm about to show you exactly what it is. By the end of this, the problems you've stopped trying to solve will look completely different. Chapter 1. The Assumption Audit. Here's why you keep failing to fix the same problems. You inherited a frame for the problem from the environment where the problem lives, and you never questioned the frame. You accepted the constraints as real, then you tried to solve within them, then you failed. Then you tried harder within the same constraints, then you failed again. Physicist and educator Richard Feynman called this the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Everyone in the aerospace industry knew the name of the cost problem. Rocket launches are expensive. They could describe it fluently. They could explain the history. They could list the components. They knew the name. None of them knew the thing, because knowing the thing means understanding which constraints are physical reality and which are inherited assumption wearing the costume of physical reality. Musk calls his method first principles thinking. Strip every problem down to its fundamental physical truths. The things that are true because physics and mathematics say they are true. Not because tradition says they are. Not because previous attempts produced that result. Not because industry consensus accepts it. Because the underlying laws of reality require it. Everything above the fundamental physical truths is negotiable. Everything. Cost structures, process sequences, material choices, organizational designs, business models, all negotiable, all potentially eliminable or replaceable, all potentially the source of your stuck problem. The assumption audit is 3 questions applied to every constraint you've accepted. Is this constraint physically required by the laws of nature? If yes, it's real. If no, ask the second question. Is this constraint required by genuine resource limitations? If yes, examine whether those resource limitations are themselves negotiable. If no, ask the third question. Who decided this was how it had to be done, and when did they decide it? The third question almost always reveals that someone made a decision under conditions that no longer exist. That decision became policy. Policy became assumption. Assumption became invisible. You've been solving inside a box someone else built for reasons that expired years ago. Your immediate action. Pick your most persistent unsolved problem. List every constraint you've accepted around it. Run all 3 questions on each one. You will find at minimum 2 constraints that are inherited assumptions with no physical basis. Those 2 are your entry points. Chapter 2. The Inversion Weapon. Here's the problem-solving method that feels so backwards, most people dismiss it immediately, which is exactly why it works. Mathematician Carl Jacobi spent his career solving problems that defeated his contemporaries. His method was documented and simple. Invert. Always invert. When you cannot solve a problem directly, define the problem you're not trying to solve and solve that instead. The solution to the inverted problem reveals the solution to the original. Charlie Munger adopted this completely. He applied it to every business problem Berkshire Hathaway faced for 50 years. Don't ask how to make a business succeed. Ask what would guarantee it fails. List every action that will guarantee failure. Then don't do those things. You've just defined the success path from the failure path. This works because human brains are structurally better at identifying errors than constructing optimal solutions. Decades of research in cognitive psychology confirm this. Error detection uses different neural pathways than solution generation. Pathways that are faster, more reliable, and more accurate. Inversion accesses those pathways deliberately. Architect and systems theorist Buckminster Fuller used inversion on every design challenge. He never asked how to build a stronger structure. He asked what makes structures fail and systematically eliminated every failure mode. The geodesic dome emerged from this process, not from imagining the ideal structure, from eliminating every source of structural weakness until what remained was inherently strong. Practical application. Your stuck problem right now. Write this sentence at the top of a page. If I wanted to guarantee this problem never gets solved, here's exactly what I would do. Fill the page. Be specific. Be creative about the failure. List every action, attitude, process, and decision that would permanently entrench the problem. Then read it as a diagnostic. You will find yourself on that list multiple times. The behaviors guaranteeing failure are not hypothetical. They are current behaviors you've been performing while simultaneously wondering why the problem persists. Hit subscribe before you forget. The next chapter is the one that turns problem solving from a skill into a system. Chapter 3. The Constraint Flip. Here's the counterintuitive truth about constraints that the greatest designers and engineers discovered independently across different centuries and disciplines. Constraints don't limit creative solutions, they generate them. Architect Frank Lloyd Wright received a commission to design a house on a steep rocky site that other architects had rejected as unbuildable. The site's constraints were considered the problem. Wright treated them as the solution. The result was falling water, built over a waterfall, using the impossible site as the defining feature. Considered one of the greatest architectural achievements in American history, produced not despite the constraints, but through them. Psychologist Patricia Stokes at Columbia studied the career output of historically creative individuals, Monet, Picasso, Stravinsky. Her finding was precise. The periods of greatest creative output consistently correlated with periods of greatest self-imposed or externally imposed constraint. Freedom produced repetition. Constraint produced innovation. Neuroscientist Charles Lim at Johns Hopkins studied jazz improvisation under brain scanning. When musicians improvise freely, standard executive function networks activated. When they improvise within tight structural constraints, like a specific chord progression or time signature, the default mode network activated simultaneously. The background creative processor, the one that finds non-obvious connections. Constraint accessed a creative system that freedom didn't. This means your resource limitations, your time pressure, your budget restrictions, your market constraints are not obstacles to solving your problem. They are the specific pressure that forces the solution nobody finds when resources are unlimited. Amazon's 14-word leadership principle: work backwards from the customer. Jeff Bezos imposed this constraint on every product decision. Start with what the customer needs. Work backward to what needs to exist, not forward from what currently exists to what customers might accept. The constraint of working backwards systematically generated innovations that forward-thinking product development missed for years. Your version. Take your most resource-constrained problem. Write this sentence. Because I have only this resource, the solution must be this shape. Force the constraint to define the solution architecture. Don't solve the constraint. Use the constraint as the design brief. Here's the problem, though. You can run the assumption audit. You can invert the problem, you can flip the constraints, and you will still fail to solve the most important problems you face because of the one meta error that sits above all problem-solving methodology: solving the wrong problem. Mathematician and philosopher Alfred North Whitehead called this the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, treating an abstraction as if it were the fundamental reality. Most people solve the problem they can see. The visible problem is almost never the fundamental problem. It is the symptom of the fundamental problem. And solving symptoms with tremendous sophistication and effort while leaving the root cause untouched is how intelligent people waste entire careers. Stanford Design School teaches a methodology called the 5 Whys, originating from Toyota's manufacturing process. When a problem appears, ask why it exists. Take that answer and ask why that is true. Take that answer and ask why again. 5 iterations minimum. The fifth why almost always lands on a root cause that is completely different from the surface problem that initiated the investigation. Toyota production line stops. Why? A machine failed. Why did the machine fail? Insufficient lubrication. Why was lubrication insufficient? The lubrication pump malfunctioned. Why did the pump malfunction? The pump intake was clogged with metal shavings. Why were metal shavings reaching the pump intake? No filter on the intake. The solution is a filter, not a new machine, not a new lubrication schedule. A $30 filter on the intake. 5 whys found it. Surface level problem solving would have replaced the machine and encountered the same failure in 6 months. Your persistent unsolved problem. 5 whys. Written down. Every answer taken seriously. The fifth answer is your actual target. Everything before it is symptom management. To keep it simple, stupid. Audit every constraint for physical reality versus inherited assumption. Invert the problem and solve for guaranteed failure to find the path to success. Use constraints as design briefs instead of obstacles. And run 5 whys on every persistent problem until you find the root cause that all the symptoms are growing from. You were never bad at solving problems. You were solving the wrong problems with the wrong constraints treated as permanent. The world rewards whoever correctly identifies what is actually fixed and what is actually negotiable. Almost everything is negotiable. Now you know how to find which parts. But here's the thing. Problem-solving frameworks compound only when your brain retains them long enough to apply them under real pressure. Most people learn systems like this and revert to default thinking within 2 weeks because the knowledge never locked in. That's why I made this video breaking down the exact memory architecture that makes every framework you learn permanently accessible the moment you need it. It's almost unfair. Watch it next.